Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Cassidy from Project Camelot and very happy to be here this afternoon. This is John Lear's birthday, and we are very, very pleased to have him with us today. And it's really great to have him online. So he is on a phone. You're not going to be able to see him, but he is here with us. And John, say hello to everyone.
Hello, everyone. I'm 76 today, and had I known I was going to live this long, I would have taken much, much better care of myself.
Okay, fair enough. Now, you have been really instrumental in this whole UFO story, unfolding it, helping to reveal the truth behind the scenes in so many ways. And we are all so grateful to you for being with us all this time and for sharing your knowledge and doing your investigations and all of that and sharing it with Project Camelot, of course, all those years ago. And we have some wonderful interviews with you, even coming up to the very recent future here or past, and including tonight. And so today is your birthday. You say Bob Lazar may be in town. He may show up at your birthday, but it might be a surprise. You don't know. So we saw Bob Lazar in Los Angeles for the premiere of a documentary, and it is made by Jeremy Corbell, and Bob Lazar was there in person with George Knapp, who I assume might be at your birthday as well. And so just want to say happy birthday, John, from me, and a lot of love from everybody. And I know people are in the chat right now. We have a live show, and I'm hoping the audio is going over well, and people will know that it is your birthday. So it's a very special time to be able to actually contact you before the festivities, I guess, really begin at your end, and you're too busy to talk to us. So this is kind of a historic moment because there was a huge crowd that did come down to watch the movie last night and support Bob Lazar. And they gave him a standing ovation, actually a couple times. And he is considered really a hero for having revealed the truth he was at liberty to disclose to some degree. And we know there's a lot of secrets still being held back. Now, what we want to do is we want to really talk to you about, first of all, back in the day, Project Camelot, you shared what Bob told you when he was going through his employ, at S4, at what some people call Groom Lake, Area 51, and you had many experiences with him, and sounds like he was kind of stopping by your house quite often, etc. So, and you've also given me some very interesting drawings he made during that time. And so why don't let's go back in time and talk about what really went on during those days when Bob Lazar was working for S4, and what happened the day that he came. You can tell the story again, if you don't mind, about how he actually saw an alien.
Yeah, he would come to my house always right after he got back from S4 and tell me as much as he can. And the first time he came, the first time he was up at Groom Lake in S4, and he said he was sitting in front of my desk, and I was just doing my regular desk work, and he said, "I saw this today." And I said, "What?" He said, "I saw this today." And I said, "Theirs or ours?" He said, "Theirs." I said, "You went to Groom Lake?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, then what are you doing here? Obviously they followed you, Bob. Why don't you work up there for a couple of months, find out what's going on, and then tell us?" They're gonna they know that they followed you up here, and they're gonna put the stop to this. And he says, "No." And he says, "I'll tell you what." He says, "I've seen you take so much crap over the last 6 months." And he said, "I wanted to tell you it's true. I saw it. I touched it. I was in it. And it's all true." And so he said, "I'm willing to go that far." And unbeknownst to Bob and us, the whole thing was a setup by MJ1. My McClellan, they had picked, they wanted to get the information out, but they wanted a way to be able to backpedal, to get out of it in case it turned sour. They wanted to find out how the public would react to this information. So what they did is they picked Bob Lazar, who was extremely intelligent, had degrees all over the place, one from MIT, one from Caltech, and I know he can't support it, but in fact, I saw those degrees, and they disappeared from my house. But anyway, they picked him because he's extremely intelligent, and he also did a lot of other things that would make him easy to discredit. For instance, at one point in his career, he ran a cat house up in Reno called the Honeysuckle Ranch. And he did a lot of other things, and they could use him, and he could contribute. As a matter of fact, his main contribution up at S4 was he told them what that little triangle was, 115. That was his contribution. They didn't know what it was until he was able to count the protons and figure out his 115. Now, there's been stories of we've been able to duplicate it. It's totally untrue. There is absolutely no way that we could duplicate the 115 that he saw and had, and we had a couple of samples of. But anyway, he'd come to my house and tell me the different things that go on. Now, in January or February of 1989, I remember it was very cold, and he came in, sat down, and he was obviously excited. He had something to tell me. Now, we knew that everything was being recorded. We knew that they had some recording device in the house. We knew all the phones were tapped, and he didn't want to really say what he had to tell me in my den. So he gave me the high sign, and we went out my den door. We walked along the side of the pool out to the back where the stables are, and there's this big giant wood gate, and Marilee happened to be back there coming out of the guest house, and she's always suspicious of what we're doing. Says, "Where are you guys going?" So we said, "Oh, we're just going out to the stables. We'll be right back." So we walked to this big wooden gate door, and hold on just a second, Allie. Walked to that wooden gate and closed it, and he just, in the corner, he backed into it. He said, and he looked at me. I said, what? And he said, "John, you'll never know what it's like to see your first alien." I said, "You saw one?" "Yep." I said, "Are you sure? It could have been a doll? Could it?" No, it was a gray. And then he told me the story about how he'd been escorted down this hallway with a guard on each side, and they were walking by a door which had a window in it that had some wires running through it, and he could see through this window a gray with facing away from him and facing two white lab-coated scientists facing towards Bob, and that is what he saw. Now, ever since he told me that, he's denied it, and that's okay, because I can understand it. First of all, it's tough enough to be able to tell the world that you worked on extraterrestrial craft and have them believe that. But to tell them you saw a live alien, no, it's not going to work. People are not going to believe it, and they're obviously going to think you're crazy. So I understand that. But, I'll tell you the story. I just told you the story. It's exactly what happened, exactly how he saw the alien. And that wasn't the only time, that there was an experience when he was being briefed on the level of security. There was an alien behind a sheeted wall that was monitoring what was going on. And there's several instances when he had that, or saw or known of the presence of a gray. The third time was when he was reading the briefings. They had to give him about 150 different briefings on a cable, and he was allowed to go through these briefings for, about an hour or half hour, 45 minutes. And when George Knapp arranged for the lie detector test with Tabernetti, Gene Huff was with Bob, and they go to whatever hotel or wherever they were going to do the recording. And there was a few minutes when nobody had showed up, and they were just sitting there waiting. And all of a sudden, Gene, who we call Goof On, looked at Bob, and Bob had turned completely white, and it looked like he was going to pass out. And he said, "What? Hey, what's the matter, Bob?" And Bob said, "I just had a total recall of reading those briefings, and there was a gray sitting across from me." And he said it was really something. I almost passed out. But that was remembering the third time he had seen an alien. But
wow, that's incredible. There is also a part in our interview where you actually say that after that, sometime after that, Bob came by and said he had actually gone on. I forget the name of the plane, but he went for the whole day. He came back and his mind had been wiped. He said, and he basically said he wanted to quit because of it. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that was the day after the third time we were all caught up at the test site and told to get out of there. The next morning, Bob got a call from, what was the guy's name? Right. Do you remember it?
No, I don't, but a guy that was sort of in charge of him.
Anyway, his boss called him and said, "Bob, don't go to the airport today. I'm going to pick you up. And we're going to drive, we're going to go somewhere." So the guy came by, picked up Bob, and this was his superior. And if I remember correctly, I think they took Bob's Corvette, but I'm not sure which car they went in. But they drove up to Indian Springs Auxiliary Air Force Base, which is now Creech Air Force Base. And that's a Air Force Base that's about 30 minutes northwest of Las Vegas. And they use that's where they use all the drones are all based out of there. Oh, but wow. It's the central headquarters for all of the security for the Nevada test site, now called the Nevada Security something. Anyway, they drive in there, and they stop in front of the building where the security headquarters was, and somebody came out and opened Bob's door and put a gun up to his head and said, "Bob, you need to come this way." And they took him into this building, and there was a couple people there. They sat him down in front of his desk, and they said, "Now, Bob, when we gave you this security clearance, it didn't mean you were supposed to take all of your friends up to the test site and show them the flying saucers. Now, do you want to work here or not?" And he was non-committal. He didn't say yes or no. They started harassing him, and they had brought the guards that had caught us, or not caught us, but stopped us up at that dirt road that leads into Groom Lake. And there was, when they got to the car, Bob had already gone out to hide in the desert. And so they said, "What are you people doing here?" And I said that, well, we thought we had interrupted some kind of drug transaction. And he said, no drug transaction. We need to know what you guys were doing here. And I said, "Oh, I just looking at the stars." And they said, "Well, then why were you trying to get away from us?" And of course, we didn't have an answer to that. But he said, we need to see a driver's license and get some information from you. So over the next half hour, there was me and Jean Hoff and Bob's wife, Tracy, and her sister. And so we gave them Social Security number, driver's license, and it went on for about a half an hour. And they said, okay, now what we want you to do is you have every right to be on this land. It's BLM land. It's not restricted. But if you do, I can guarantee you we're going to make it very, very uncomfortable for you. So you need to be on your way. So they get in their car and they turn around and leave. I think there were 2 cars there, and go down the road. It was very, very dark there. I mean, it was just, there weren't any lights except the vehicle lights, and we couldn't see exactly what they were doing. But anyway, about 2 minutes later, Bob comes out of the desert, and he had his 9mm handgun with him, and he regaled us with his story. He says, I had him right in my sights, and he said, boy, if they'd ever made one move towards me, he said, I would have pulled the trigger and all this. And of course, unbeknownst to us, the security guys had just gone down maybe 100 yards away down this road, and they were filming us, and they had a parabolic microphone and recording everything that we said. So anyway, we talked for about 15 minutes, and then we got back in the car, and it was only another mile or two to the 375 and the highway. And so we drove down there, and just as we got to the paved road, the sirens start and red lights, and the highway patrol have been waiting for us, and they pulled us over, and the usual stuff, out of the car, get your hands up, everybody face the car, put your hands on top of the rope, and da 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 da. So we all did that, and the guy's name was, I thought I'd never forget it. He was the head, and I'm not sure whether Lincoln County Sheriff, and so he was the one that always they called out there whenever they had problems. So we kind of knew the guy anyway, and so he is in contact with the security at Groom Lake. And of course, we can't hear that conversation, but he says, okay, now look at, he says, I want to know 2 things. He said, I want to know why there are 5 people in this car now, and there was only 4 when security stopped you a half an hour ago on the road. And he said, the second thing I want to know is where the 45 is. And we put the 45 in the trunk. So we hemmed and hawed, and nobody gave an answer of this or that. And pretty soon, it was either just before he made that statement or after, but he said, okay, I'm going to need to see everybody's driver's licenses. And like a complete idiot, and Bob has never forgiven me for this, I said, mine's in the trunk, which is where we had the gun and all the Geiger counters and everything else. And to this day, he's never forgiven me for that. But anyway, we did not open the trunk. We just hemmed and hawed, and this guy, I don't remember his name, I kept saying, all I have to do is get a court order, and I can get this vehicle towed, and we can find the 45 and put you all in jail. And all this went on for like about an hour. And he was always talking to the security people. We don't know what he was saying, but we hemmed and hawed, and nobody gave anything, no information at all. So after about, I think it was pretty close to an hour, he says, okay, now here's the deal. He said, I don't know why I'm being told this, but they're telling me to let you go and tell you never to come back here again. So you need to get in the car and leave right now, which we did. And everybody got in the car. And I remember that long drive home where we discussed what Bob was going to use for an excuse to having been out there. And so the next day when Dennis Mariana picked him up and took him up to Indian Springs, and they started debriefing him and saying, you know, Bob, when we gave you this clearance, it didn't mean that you were supposed to take all of your friends up there and show them the flying saucers. And they had two of the guys that had stopped us, and apparently they didn't know anything about the flying saucers, because Bob said they had a shocked look on their face when the guy said flying saucers. So
that's like awesome. So, okay. So you're saying though, that it's sort of the crunch came during that time and after it, when Bob basically took that flight one day, and then he came back.
Okay, let me finish now. Let me finish.
Okay, go ahead.
Now, so they said, now there's a problem, Bob, and we've discovered that your wife is having an affair with her flight instructor, and you can't work with us until you get that sorted out, because we don't want anybody with the emotional kinds of problems that can happen with these kind of things. So you're going to have to get that sorted out before you come back to work. So then Bob leaves, and Mariana drives him back. And I talked to Bob either that day or the next day, and I asked him, you know, if he was going to go back, if he got his problem sorted out. And he said no. And I said, why not? He said, because the last two flights that I made in the 737 up to Groom Lake, he said I could remember climbing up the steps to board the airplane in the morning, and I could remember coming back down those steps in the evening, but I couldn't remember anything I did. And they have a way of controlling your mind so that you can't remember what you did. Now, they used to be able to do this many years prior to that. Now, I personally have known people that have worked up there and told it, but many years prior, like 20, 30 years prior, they could do the same thing. But the problem was people could remember that they had done something and it bothered them. And they had problems trying to remember what they did. Whereas in this case, Bob said, you know, it didn't bother him at all. Just remembered that he had done something, but it didn't create a problem other than the fact that he didn't want to work like that. So that's when he told me that he would not have gone back had they offered it.
Okay. Now, do you think, because I told you haven't seen this film yet that came out, the Jeremy Corbyn one, right?
Right.
Okay. But some people have reported various things to you. And I called you because I wanted to warn you that in the film, it appears that Bob Lazar no longer remembers that he saw a real alien.
He never did remember from the first day, the next day or the next week, whenever it was, whenever people would ask him that story, he said, he would say, no, they showed, there was a window and I looked through it, but it was obviously a doll and they were just doing some kind of mind game. And John has made this all up. I told him the story and John said, that was an alien. You saw an alien. And John's just making that stuff up. And that's been his story all along. But I can understand that, and I can understand why he said that. But the story I just told you a few minutes ago is exactly the way it happened.
Right. Okay. And then you've also elaborated that he's actually seen more than one. Now, I'm very curious. There's two questions that never got asked during the interviews with him, and I think it's quite astonishing. One is whether he ever rode in the craft, because he was supposed to be working on it so much, number one. And number two is whether or not some of that missing time, whether he felt that he'd ever been, abducted, messed with, and had those memories wiped. Wouldn't that be a normal thing to wonder?
I don't believe he ever read in the craft. It's possible he did, but I don't think they did that. I think only the guy that was flying it was the guy that was allowed to ride in the craft. I don't think they would risk having us. I don't think they would risk having a scientist go in the craft. As far as being abducted, are you talking about his prior life?
No, I mean, the prior life is is perfectly fair game for abduction, as you know, and you must know something about the Greys at this point, to this degree that we know that the abductions are still going on. They're rampant, and they've been rampant for all those years. But the question is, as a scientist, having his mind wiped, it's very logical that maybe he was even chosen because he was having interactions with Greys, and maybe he didn't know it.
Okay, so what's the question?
The question is whether or not you ever talked to him as a friend about whether he'd been abducted.
I may have, but I don't ever remember talking to him about whether he'd been abducted. In those days, I think I was still under the impression that there was only a few people that they abducted. I think it was like we thought that it was 1 in 10. But since then, I've found out that they abduct everybody. Everybody. And everybody is abducted at least 5 or 10 times during their lifetime. And that's just the way it goes. But so I'm sure that he would have been abducted, but I never talked to him about it. Because in those days, I thought it was like 1 in 10 that they abducted.
Okay, well, you know Bob's wife, right?
Pardon?
You know Bob's wife. I don't know her name, but his wife.
Tracy.
She's in the film a few times. And have you ever talked to her about whether, have you guys sat around and talked about abduction since then? You've been friends with him now for, I don't know, over 60 years probably, or maybe more.
No, I never talked to her about it. We weren't that close. And, when all this was going on, for some reason, she wasn't around very much. The only action I had with her was when Bob first was he didn't know exactly where S4 was. We thought it was to the north. And she and I rented an airplane and we flew up north of Groom Lake, and we were looking along the ridge, the western ridge of Bald Mountain for this facility. But we didn't see anything. And it was only like a week or two later that we found out it was to the south, along Papoose Lake, that this facility was.
All right. So you think he was selected for the program in general? You mean you think that the military had in mind to actually let him kind of be a whistleblower at a certain point?
Absolutely, positively. That was Mike McClellan's idea. He was MJ1, and I've been told that was his idea. They wanted to get the information out, but they also wanted to be able to get themselves out of a fix if the public reacted if the public reaction was something that they didn't like. So the way they could do that is get somebody who was extremely qualified for that position, but be able to discredit him instantly in case things turn sour. So yes, it was all planned from the beginning, and they knew that Bob Lazar would instantly tell me what was going on, and they knew that I would blab the whole story, and that was the way they had it planned. That's the way it worked out.
Right. Okay. Now, why? Tell me something. Why were you not interviewed for this film?
Which film?
This new documentary with James that Jeremy Corbell has put out.
I don't know. You know, Jeremy. A lot of the stuff that's in that movie came out of my den. Jeremy interviewed me for 2 or 3 years for the movie he was going to make on me, and he had access to my videotapes, my stories about Bob, and my memorabilia, drawings and stuff. So I've seen the trailer, and I've seen my stuff in there. Nobody's asked me permission, and after all, we're for getting the information out, so I can't say too much about it. I can't object to it because he did get the information out. So
okay,
as to why they didn't put me in, I'm not the subject. Bob was the subject.
All right. So let me ask you this, because last night Bob Lazar was on stage with Jeremy, the director, as well as George Knapp. And someone asked him, what he was referring to when he said he saw the alien cadavers. Apparently he saw pictures of an alien cadaver, and that was part of the briefing report. They clarified that piece of information. But what they didn't do is talk about his having seen an alien. And obviously, if you're saying Corbell had access to your information, he decided not to use your side of that story about Bob having seen an alien, correct?
I don't remember discussing that. I must have. Over the 3 years he was up here, I'm sure I told him that story a million times. But right. I don't know why they used it.
They didn't.
I do know that
they did not use it.
That Corbell was looking for some kind of new information, because everybody wanted, those of us that have known Bob for 30 years wanted this to be the Lazar tape too. We was going to divulge more stuff, but Bob's told just about, everything that ever happened to him. There is nothing else.
Let me ask you something, because in the film, he has this thing that supposedly was relatively new, at least to many in the audience, even old timers, having to do with using his hand to access the doors to get inside the facility and so on. And that it was some kind of, I don't know if you call it biometric or what it is, but he showed a picture. Apparently Jeremy had found a picture of this machine they used back in those days that matched Bob's description of how you had to put your hand up and it had to fit, and it read something about your hand. Do you remember that story?
Yeah, it measured 2 bones in your hand. When you put your hand on this machine, there's 2 bones inside your hand that are different for every single human being, and that's how they can identify you, other than the eyeball recognition and facial recognition and all that. This was just another way to be sure that you were who you were supposed to be, and it had to do with these 2 bones in your hand.
All right. So have you seen a picture of the device, or did Jeremy show you the photo he found, or had Bob?
No, I've never heard of it.
Oh, really? Okay, that's interesting. No. All right. So now you sent me some drawings that Bob made. One of them is obviously of the alien with the 2 guys standing over him as seen through that little window, which is he did describe that scene. He just later didn't say that little being was a gray. originally said it was a gray, but then he apparently now is saying it might have been a doll. Is that correct?
So, yeah, those are, when he first told me the story, he told it out in the backyard, and then when we came inside, I had a piece of paper there and asked him different questions. And you can see on the piece of paper that he has up on the top right-hand side, or the left-hand side, is the dimensions of the hangars, which was 360 feet, and each one was about 40 feet in dimension. And at the bottom, there's a drawing of how the UFO fit in the hangar, and up to the right-hand side at the top is a drawing of the test site and where Area 51 was and where Papoose Lake was. And on the other side of that piece of paper is the drawing of the Aurora, which he saw several times at Groom Lake when he got out of the 737. And he said it was parked a little ways away, and he could only see it from the back. So the drawing that I posted many times on the web is the view that what he saw from the back, and it was a gigantic 2 squares for the exhaust for the whatever engine it was. He said you could easily put a full-size automobile in it, or more, or bigger than that. And he's described it as a shape of a X-15, but much, much larger.
Okay, now and, that Aurora, is that one of ours? Is that one of ours?
Aurora?
Yeah, did we design it? Was it designed by Lockheed or whatever?
Yeah, that was the one that they denied never made, but they made 7 of them. 2 of them crashed. One of them crashed at Bald Mountain on takeoff just north of Groom. But you talk to people associated with the program, and they completely deny it and said, oh, no, that was what they called, that was the name for the B1 when they were, or the B2 when they were initially designing it. But that's all BS. I mean, there's many more, or not many, but there's a lot more aircraft. Some people think that Lockheed Skunk Works is the only one to have made secret airplane, but there's at least 3 other aircraft manufacturers that make secret airplanes that we have no idea. And I do. I've heard about other airplanes, but and just recently there's one that Crow 777 has posted the videos of, and it has 3 engines, and it's at least at an altitude of 200,000 or 300,000 feet. And I think it's an amazing video. Nobody talks about it, but we do have those craft, and
very cool.
And they are there. So Lockheed isn't the only one.
Absolutely. Well, now I wanted to ask you: did Bob Lazar ever meet Ben Rich?
I never heard of him meeting Ben Rich.
Okay.
Now, if you know my story of, have you been reading my Facebook pages?
When I can, but sometimes you're doing a lot. I might have missed something.
Okay. Well, about 6 months ago, I wrote a story of the F-117A, the history of the F-117A, and how it was run. Air Force Systems Command, Lieutenant General Bobby Bonds ran the program. And when Ben Rich's book came out called The Skunk Works, he let out a few hints that led me to the story of the F-19. The F-19, they made 64 of them. It went down the assembly line next to the F-117A, but was hidden by a large metal curtain, and nobody from one program was allowed to work on the other program. And those F-19s were a Batwing stealth fighter more advanced than the F-117A. They made 64 of them, and I believe that most of them went to Israel. And it turns out that Ben Rich was the highest-ranking Mossad spy west of Mississippi, and he had access to just about every secret we had, not only within the aircraft business, but other businesses too. And what's interesting, Terry, is that 2 weeks ago I went to Daryl Greenemeyer's Celebration of Life in Indio. And of course, Daryl Greenemeyer was the fifth guy to fly the Blackbird, and he and I have been friends for 40 years. Well, I was sitting at a banquet table with Marilee at the door of the banquet, and before everybody had come in, and two guys came in, and one was Adam Robbins, who helped me and Daryl put on the Mojave California 1000 in 1970. The other person I won't name, but he came over. I'd known him for 40 years. He shook my hand. He said, "John, there's a few of us that thank you for writing about our secrets." And that told me that what I put was true, that essentially Israel has taken over not only our country, but Lockheed in total. And they had one of the highest ranking Mossad spies, head of the Skunk Works. And of course, the guys that work there, they're bound by their security clearances. And even though they don't work there anymore and they've retired, they can't say anything about it. And so when he said, "We want to thank you for publishing our secrets," it gave me a high that lasted for about a week.
Very good. Okay, now there's a story that you started to tell actually before we got live on the phone, and you were talking about a promise that Bob made. He said he was going to kill himself, and how he had to renege on that promise. Can you tell that story?
Yeah, it was when I started talking about the moon and the buildings up there, and I was becoming aware of all the stuff that was going on the moon and the humans that lived up there. And as a matter of fact, I just saw a post that Stephen Bassett made. I don't know who Bassett is, but he said you could take it to the bank that Lear's wrong to earn 250,000 people that live on the moon. And he's right. I was wrong. There's 2 billion people live up there, and all they have to do is look at Bruce Schwartz's videos. So
right.
I don't know what Stephen Bassett is using for information.
Exactly.
But whatever he's got is wrong. But anyway, I was onto this about the time I met Bob, and I was showing some of the pictures that showed the stuff. So when I walked out this particular day of his house, he said, "You know, John," he said, "if any of this stuff turns out to be true about this moon stuff that you're talking about, I'm going to have to kill myself." Because, of course, Bob can't stand that I know anything that he doesn't. So I said, "Well, wait just a minute." And I had a little piece of paper, and I put on it. I have it here. I have the original piece of paper. It says, "I, Bob Lazar, promise to kill myself if any of John's moon stuff is true. Signed, Bob Lazar, August 23rd, 1996. So, of course, a couple of years goes by, and I started ordering photos from the NASA contractor, and by some colossal, of course, there is no such thing as a coincidence. So I'll just say somebody sent me, I ordered one of the Copernicus pictures that's taken at an oblique angle, and I think it's Lunar Orbiter 2 163 or 162. But anyway, when it came as a 15 by 20 negative. And this is just absolutely unbelievable that somebody would be sent something that big. Usually you get, an airpress version that's an 8 by 10 positive. But anyway, it was so large that in those days, Las Vegas didn't have the capability of printing a 15 by 20 negative. So I had to wait a couple of years before the technology got to where I could get a print. So when I finally did, I had a 15 by 20 print of this Copernicus picture, and it showed, all kinds of stuff. It showed buildings, and it showed vapor coming up from these huge cylindrical tanks, and all kinds of things on it. But anyway, I took it over to Bob's and showed him the one building that we call the parking garage, and because it had to be several hundred feet tall and had a ramp on the side. So he says, well, yeah, there's no doubt about it. That is something that shouldn't be there. And I said, okay, now, Bob, we've been friends a long time, and I don't want to presume on our friendship, but you did promise to kill yourself if any of my moon stuff was true. And he says, well, how can I get out of it? And I said, well, let me run something, and then you sign it. So I'm reading from here. It says, August 3rd, 1998. Hi, Bob Lazar. In return for not having to honor my commitment to kill myself, if any of John's moon stuff was true, do freely admit that the object on the crater Copernicus on the moon, saved as Apple Crate, is a box which I don't know what is doing there. Signed, Bob Lazar. Now, we saved it as Apple Crate because even though it's a building, Bob is not going to put building. He's going to put Apple Crate. And so I had those two pieces of paper, and I posted them on the web, and I try to get him to sign stuff sometimes when he doesn't believe me, and then it turns out I'm true. But as far as the alien thing, I visited him in 2003. I had delivered Lockheed L-1011 TriStar to Roswell, and Bob had invited me to Albuquerque to see him, and I took a bus from Roswell to Albuquerque, and he picked me up at the bus station, and I stayed with him for a couple of days. But during those couple of days, we'd go out in the garage and do whatever we did. Bob was working on different stuff, and that's when he gave me the half-scale version of the antimatter reactor, which is now in my den in a glass case, and it's probably the greatest thing he ever gave me. But anyway, on one of these days, we're talking, and I said, now, Bob, you're always denying this story about the alien that you told me. And he said, I do remember. I remember it. And I remember telling you that. So I got a piece of paper, and I wrote down John. I remember Bob Lazar, August 14th, 2003. But I couldn't get him to sign it. But at least I got the piece of paper, and it reminds me that he did admit it. And I don't need him to admit it. I know what he said. And I don't blame him for not admitting it, because people would just think he's stupid.
This is a different time now, and everyone, like I said, he got standing ovations last night and for showing up, and he didn't stay very long or answer many questions. In fact, they wouldn't even let the audience talk to him. They insisted someone was able to send Twitter questions apparently, but they really had him kind of on lockdown. Now, how do you know? Do you have any idea how he was convinced, after all these years of saying he wouldn't do such a thing, that he was convinced to actually participate in a documentary?
I don't know. Jeremy has a way of ingratiating himself to people. I know he did to me, and I don't think Bob said very much different than what he's been saying now.
Right.
But it's certainly a good a good thing for people who did not know that much about Bob Lazar. It would be great for them, this video. But for the people who have known about Bob for the last 30 years, they wanted more information, you know. Come on, tell us the rest of the story. You know, and there was no more rest of the story. He's told everything there was. And I think somebody told me that Jeremy alludes to secret information about 115, but there is no more secret information about 115. The one thing that they don't say that I know is Bob was the one that figured out it was element 115.
Okay, now
got there, and that was his contribution to S4.
Right, and you did say that earlier today. So now there is a question about the end of the film. They make it sound as though Bob is going to tell some big secret, and then and then nothing happens, and then he gets his house broken into, and they make a big thing about the FBI searching the house for this element 115, saying that, oh, maybe he secreted away a piece of it. After all these years, suddenly they're going to search his house, which sounds kind of ludicrous. But
it's all bullshit. Carrie, that's all bullshit. The FBI was there, or whoever it was. They were interested in the stuff that he supposedly stored there, and it was actually the DEA that gave him the stuff to store. And when the FBI found that stuff, and I forget what chemical it was, they said, "What do you think the DEA would think if we told them it was there?" And he said, "Why don't you ask them? They're the ones that put it there."
Okay, that just sounds
just nothing to do with 115.
All right. Well, you know what? He also says all kinds of agency people were there searching his house. But, you know, it's really interesting to me. He never once mentions the CIA, which makes me think that the CIA are the ones that put this guy, Jeremy Corbell, up to this whole making this documentary, and that he and Knapp and all these guys got together and decided he was an airtight disclosure witness, that suddenly Bob Lazar's story could be told to the public. And so now they're trotting him out, and he's basically going along with it, because why shouldn't he? He wants to be vindicated after all these years, right?
Okay, so what's your statement?
Well, my statement is simply that it's very interesting when he started naming agencies that supposedly were surveilling him, or, you know, looking at stuff in his house. He never once mentioned the CIA.
Yeah.
So that's to me, that's a big oversight. Certainly,
like I say, Carrie, that had nothing to do with 115 or any of his work.
All right.
I think they want to, or Jeremy or whoever wants to say that there's some big secret and they're going to find it out. It's not true.
All right. Well, you know, you've heard about the idea of people in our business, so to speak, having a get out of jail free card, right? And putting something hiding something. I mean, I'm sure Gary McKinnon did it. You know, you could name everybody that you or I know who might know anything about this sector. Wouldn't there be a good reason for Bob to have what you call a get out of jail free card? Is that what they're looking for?
Well, I don't think he has one, but
right.
You know, I don't know.
Well, let me ask you something. Do you have one?
No. No, I don't. But the only guy I knew that really had a get out of jail free card was a guy named Farhad Azima, and he was an Iranian that ran one of the airlines I worked for, Global International. And we did all kinds of stuff that he had to have had a get out of jail free card. And one thing he did is he was an inveterate gambler, and he used to gamble at the dunes. And when I first applied for a job at Global Airlines, the chief pilot took an immediately disliking to me. And he said, no, we don't need you. And I was fully qualified. I had Boeing 707 command time out the kazoo, and he just didn't like me, and I wasn't going to get a job there. So I had a friend that worked in operations there, and he called me one day and he said, Farhad's out there in Vegas at the dunes. And I said, oh, cool. So I happened to know the casino manager at the dunes, and I went out there and I forget his name. He said, what's going on, John? And I said, I'm trying to get a job with Global, and I just can't get by the chief pilot. I wonder if you could help me. He says, absolutely. Give me 10 minutes. So he disappears out of the office, comes back 10 minutes later, says, come on, I want you to meet Farhad. So we go out into the crab table, and Farhad's sitting there, and he reaches out to shake my hand. He says, John, it's a pleasure to meet you, and it's nice to have you as an employee of Global International Airlines, and ground school starts next Monday. So I was absolutely shocked, and I talked to him for a few minutes and then walked back into the casino manager's office, and I said, how in the heck did you do that? And he said, well, Farhad owes us $4 million, and we gave him $2 million off if he'd hire you.
Wow.
I said, well, thanks. I appreciate that.
That's incredible. Well, why were they so motivated to have you work for Global?
Pardon?
Why were they so motivated to have you work for Global?
Who?
I don't know. The guy who you said got you the job.
Oh, no, he was just friends. He was just friends. And they knew they weren't going to get the $4 million out of Farhad. So the best they could do was get me a job.
All right. Fair enough. Now,
that's all they got.
I want to ask you something else. And I have a chat room along with the show, and I know you've got a party that's going to be starting soon, so we don't want to keep you too long. But you guys had, you remember the shootings in Vegas, right? You were there at the time.
The what?
The shootings, the shootings you had, the casino.
Yeah.
Well, we think there was a lot more going on than meets the eye in that whole situation. And false flags, etc., but also a lot of money changing hands. And I don't think I've ever gotten a chance to ask you, do you know anything about that story?
I can't go into it now, Carrie, because there's just not enough time. But Stephen Paddock he worked for the FBI. He worked directly for Aaron Roos, who was a special agent in charge. They gave him the money to buy those 73 guns that they were going to trade to the ISIS. And all it was a cover-up to try and not get everybody to know that the FBI was trading guns with the ISIS. And Stephen Paddock did not die. He did not shoot anybody. The body camera that they say the guy forgot to turn on when they originally breached the room, that shows 3 women in there, and Paddock was still alive. I don't know who they put there, who they killed, but it wasn't Stephen Paddock.
Very good.
You know that when the Clark County coroner did the autopsy, the body that they autopsied was 3 inches shorter than Stephen Paddock. Now, how more definite could you get of a cover-up than that? And, someday we'll go into it, but I got my party now, and I gotta get going.
All right. Well, it's really been a joy to have you on as always, John, and we really thank you for coming on the show today on your special day. Everyone does wish you a happy birthday. Do you have to go right away now? Because I want to be fair to you. I know you've got a party starting, but I'm going to also say that there could be some people with questions I haven't thought of that might want to ask you something, or they could maybe write, correspond with you on Facebook, whatever you like.
Yeah, just have them correspond me on Facebook, and I really would stay, Gary, but my family is telling me to get off the phone.
All right.
We got to get ready for people here. All right, stay.
All right. Happy birthday, John. Stay with us. Stay healthy. Okay. And thank you so much for being with us today.
Okay. Thank you, Carrie. It's always a pleasure to work with you.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So, well, that's John Lear on his birthday, as honorary and as brilliant and on it and with it as always. And there's quite a few little clues in there for people who attended the screening, the premiere last night. I was there. I saw Jimmy Church there. Melinda Leslie was there. Lori Benton, and didn't see too many others that we know at all around and about, but a few others, I guess, were there. Maybe people I didn't see. And it was an interesting crowd, and there were some interesting energies going on in that building, which is in downtown LA. Let me say that. So anyway, thanks for listening today. And it's a very special day. I'm sure you wish John Lear happy birthday, and be sure to go to his Facebook page if you're able to, if you're on Facebook, and wish him happy birthday. I hope that Bob Lazar will visit him tonight at his birthday and for his birthday. You know, I did go to his birthday party last year, but John wanted me to film it, which I did. I made a film for John. It was exclusively for his memories. And but apparently the guests got very offended, or at least one or two of them did. I have no idea who they might be, but at any rate, and they didn't trust me. So I've never released it. I never will. When I stand by my word. But John trusted me, and still does. But I can say that they said I'm persona non grata at this moment for John's birthday. I guess because of that. So at any rate, we are here long distance wishing him a very, very happy birthday and many more to come. So thank you for watching and participating here. I am going to have some very interesting guests this week. And I am going to also be, I just found out, on Jimmy Church's show on the 11th of December. So if you are a big fan of Jimmy's, and I know he has a lot of you out there, then I will be out and about on Jimmy's show. So you can see me next on the 11th. And I think his show is on 7 p.m. Pacific time on, let's see, I think the 11th might be a Tuesday. Not sure. Anyway, and before that, this week on Thursday night at 7 p.m. Pacific time on my show, I'm going to have a new whistleblower, relatively new, and he has a book out, and it is an excellent book, and I highly recommend it. His name is Terry Lovelace, and he is ex-military. He's a lawyer. He's quite a very intelligent guy, really. And he and a fellow, I guess, recruit at the time had some very interesting experiences with ETs, and very unforgettable, changed his entire life permanently, and still is changing his life, actually. And so we're going to be talking about that. That is, again, on Thursday night at 7 p.m. Pacific time. And let's see, I think I might be doing a show with, let's see, Paul Price, Richard Paul Price, or Rick Price, depending on which name you want to use for him. He has his own radio show that's on like mainstream radio. And I don't have the call letters, but I will put all this on my site once I have it. And I will be on his show, I think, on the Thursday in the early day. So it'll be around 1 p.m. Pacific time. So that's coming up this week as well. I'm going to be having Deborah Tavares back with me, or Tavares, and we are going to be talking more about the coming, changes that they're instrumental in making have happen, having to do with earthquakes, etc. And so that has not been scheduled, but please be aware that I am planning to have her back, and we are planning to do that. I do want to say that there is another show. Oh, Robin Falkov, who is a healer, and she is also the partner of Richard Hoagland, is going to be on my show on Friday at 1 p.m. this week. So that's very exciting. I haven't talked to Robin in quite a while. And so it was really exciting that she accepted my invitation to come on the show. So we're going to catch up with her and see what she's up to. She does do a radio show on her own, and I don't have her details here right this minute. They will show up on my website. But again, Robin Valkov, in case you're aware of her, will be on the show on Friday. And I have actually invited Richard Hoagland to join me on my show. It's not the only time I've invited him, but I don't think I got an answer from him. So I'm still waiting to find out if he's going to ever be willing to come on my show again. Some people turn out to be sort of very shy and evasive eventually. And I think that that's because perhaps they are a little worried about some of the things that they may say on my show, as opposed to other people who don't ask such probing questions, perhaps. At any rate, things are moving along. Disclosure is being helped along, as you can clearly see. And I do recommend the documentary by Jeremy Corbell. I will invite him on my show if I can manage to get in communication with him. I think it's very interesting that he was helped along by George Knapp and others, I'm sure, to make this documentary happen. Again, with Bob Lazar, and it's got good stuff. It's very supportive of Bob Lazar's story, which I do appreciate. It's a trifle long, probably needs a re-edit, and could use some a few more probing questions, I would say. But we'll see what happens in the future with all of that. But thanks again for watching and being here today. And please do wish John Lear a happy birthday. Take care and have a great night. Bye-bye.